The movie begins with Riley and Janai, an American couple who are traveling to Iceland for a romantic getaway. Riles wakes up first from sleep due to the long journey on the bus and takes out his father's Rolleiflex camera when he realizes they are passing by the beautiful mountains of Iceland. Janai gazes at him as her adventurous partner takes a picture with great enthusiasm. After checking into the hotel, they begin their tour with a visit to the geothermal pool, which they also swim inside. Janai knew he had spent all his savings on this trip and expressed her gratitude. She playfully painted his face with mud, which he reciprocated. After their swim, they get something to eat at a local restaurant. Janai asks him why he won't let her buy him a new camera. Riley says to her that he doesn't want a computer auto-correcting everything and wants to capture the imperfections of the moment. Then they visit a beautiful old church built in the 18th century. The priest of the church explains the church's history and calls the pre-Christian times back then simple. Janai tells him that she doesn't miss anything about churches because her father was a preacher, but she admits it was not as beautiful as the old church. They also visited other sites, including a beautiful historical gathering place that Riley captures. Janai also has fun in her own way. She enjoys having her pictures taken and shares a beautiful kiss with Riley at a waterfall. Janai wakes up in the middle of the night and has trouble falling back asleep. She looks out the window to admire the view of the northern lights, then she sees a strange light flashing from the horizon. After some hours, Riley wakes her up and removes the bedsheets, but she refuses as hopes to continue his adventure. She drags herself out of bed and goes with him. They found out that their lodging didn't have breakfast and checked out the area of the receptionist, but no one was there. So they decide to go into the city. Although it was around 10:30, the whole town had gone quiet, and there wasn't a living soul out there. Riley thought it was the holidays, but as they kept traveling through town and calling out for people with no response, they began to get concerned. They checked out the supermarket, stores, and the local bar at last, but there was no staff or anyone who answered their call. Riley called the restaurant from the previous day, and Janai called her mom, but both had the same answer. Janai gets worried and asks where everyone went after mentioning they have covered half the city by now. Riley turned on the news and it was working, but within a few seconds, all the news channels began to shut down. Janai called her mom for a second time, but she couldn't get her, so she leaves her a message asking me to call her back. Confused about the whole thing, Riley takes Janai's hands and gets her out of the bar. As they were walking to their hotel, he put out different theories about aliens and contagious diseases, but none of them made sense for him. She keeps calling her friends after arriving at the hotel room, while Riley checks on the internet, which was working but had not been updated since yesterday. Text messages, calls, and the internet were working, but no one was there from the other side. He tried to broaden his search by accessing public cameras from the Coney Island train station and the Vatican City, but nobody could be seen. Refusing to believe they are the only ones left, Riley takes Janai outside. They found a running car with no one inside it, so they drove out of the city and into the countryside, but nothing changed. Janai thinks it may be the rupture or the apocalypse. After going almost everywhere searching for a person alive, they come to realize they may be the only people left alive and hug each other. They drive back into the city and sit together at the restaurant. Janai tries calling her mother for the third time, but she gets sent to voicemail. Riley couldn't come up with anything to say to make things better, but he is happy they are at least together. They get back to the hotel after a very long day, and Janai tells him to close the shades. Riley, who is lost in his thoughts clouded with confusion, does as she tells him. On the next day, Riley tries to wake up the depressed Janai, who doesn't want to get out of bed. He leaves her after she refuses to have breakfast. After a while, Janai eventually woke up and checked her email, but there was no update. Then she asks Riley how they are going to get home, but he doesn't have an answer. Janai thought that they were selected for something, but Riley doesn't believe it is a divine intervention or anything plausible. Instead of trying to make sense of what happened, Riley believes they should focus on the solution. But Riley is hung up on getting back home, which may never exist. Riley goes out to the local restaurant and brings a coffee along with some food for Janai. Then they went out shopping. They took out many goods on multiple shopping carts and filled up 2 vehicles. Janai reminds him about having a tiny fridge for all their staff to fit in, but Riley packs their belongings from the hotel and shows her a very nice house. Although she doesn't feel comfortable breaking in, Riley tells her they now own the house since no one will come to claim it. They go to a clothing store and Riley reads a magazine which states about the automated geothermal plants that will keep the power running. They continue having fun trying on the clothes. After spending the day in another store that contains kitchen materials, they go out to have a drink at a bar. Janai gets really drunk and continuously laughs at Riley, whom she kept beating at a game of Monopoly. While having breakfast together on the next day, Janai wonders if all these events are a test of faith, but she is left confused when Riley, who doesn't believe in God, asks her in detail. He cheers her up and reminds her about having the whole world for themselves. Later, he picks up Janai, who was holding flowers and was walking on the open road. They travel to a beautiful green land and lay down some blankets on it. He planned to sleep enjoying the fresh air, but Janai pokes him and takes her clothes off to swim at a nearby pool. He follows her and joins her for a swim. They make love with each other, and Janai later wakes up to visit a field full of flowers. Riley, who brought his camera with him, kept taking pictures of her as she passed through the breathtaking field. After returning from their adventure, they go back to shopping. Riley rolls around using the shopping carts, while Janai also has fun, but he falls down and hurts his arm. He recovers and both prepare to go on a dinner date. On the romantic date, Janai talked to him about his reckless behavior. He tells her it was an accident and calls her out for being afraid to live. But Janai reminded him that there was no one to call if something had happened. When Riley kept arguing with her, Janai left him and he had to walk back alone. When he arrives home, he promises not to do such reckless things again, but she was too obsessed about forgetting her book in the States. She gets mad at herself for forgetting it since she used it to journal. Riley reminds her of all the things they have going for them at the moment, but she comes clean about the real reason she is mad and tells him she just wants to go home. After going through the mall together and visiting another historical site, Janai and Riley come home to get some food. Janai finds out that the tap water is gone and gets angry at Riley, who is eating the yogurt that they were supposed to conserve according to the expiration date. She reminds him about their food conservation plan, which they made after realizing their scarce resource, and confronts him about wasting it. He says he can farm for more food if necessary, but she wants to stick to their strict arrangement. Riley goes swimming in a public pool, while Janai goes to the ancient. She speaks to the statues of martyrs, questioning why she is stuck in no man's land. Later, the couple visit a natural hot water spring and enjoy the view of the ocean. After playing with each other, they climb the stones which seem to have piled perfectly on top of each other. Riley shares ancient tales, enjoying the view, but Janai reminds him that they are out of water. On their way back, Riley makes a stop at an abandoned shell of a plane that crashed a long time ago. Riley sees it as a tourist site and calls it a beautiful thing to see, but Janai calls it a dead thing that has outlived its usefulness. Riley gets offended by her dull senses and confronts her about it. She expresses her real emotions and tells him no one is coming for them. Riley was trying to make her smile by changing scenes and remaining positive, but she thinks that he is in denial, treating their whole situation as some sort of a game. Riley asks her what he was supposed to do, and she tells him to open his eyes to reality. She gets into the car and drives off. After walking around alone for a while, Riley spends the night sleeping in the abandoned old plane while she tries to sleep in the car. But she comes back and sits across from him later. In the morning, Riley wakes up and sees Janai standing outside of the abandoned plane with something to drink in her hands. He goes to stand with her and she offers him the drink. After standing quietly for a while, they drive back into the city, where they spend time separately. Riley walks around the city, which is full of street art, and photographs them. He stares at a picture of a person wearing a red hoodie and gets very interested in a painting showing the picture of Stefan Sagmista, a famous graphics designer. After he stares into the eyes of this picture, he takes out the film of the camera and throws it out. At the same time, Janai spends her time looking at her email from her mom while listening to music. The next day, Riley goes to a section of the mall where construction materials are sold, while Janai continues to stare at her laptop. He buys a couple of pipes and enters the elevator. When it malfunctions and closes, he freaks out and repeatedly bangs the doors. The elevator opens up after a while and he leaves safely. Meanwhile, Janai goes to church and kneels down, trembling in fear and anxiety. She stares at the windows with her tearful eyes. Riley gets back from the mall with some belongings and drinks water. He looked for her in the house, but she was not there. Janai has gone out to a farm and she interacts with a horse, feeding it vegetables. Riley gets to work on his water wheel with the materials he brought at the mall, while Janai goes horse riding and looks at a couple of other horses passing through together. The couple eventually get back together, and Janai drives to another beautiful natural site. Riley slept most of the way while Janai listened to voice messages from the past. She gets emotional as she misses her family and the way things used to be. After reaching a dry glacier walk climbing place, they enjoy a run trying to make it first. After they reach the dry glaciers, Riley takes out his camera and continues to take pictures like he usually does. Riley asks him why he keeps taking pictures when he doesn't have a place to develop them, but the hopeful Riley tells her he will have something in the future. They take a seat and Janai rests her head on his shoulder, holding his arm. For the first time, she is amazed by nature and mentions they are sitting on a glacier. But she quickly gets back to her gloomy behavior and tells him that God got impatient and left them on Earth. Riley confesses he doesn't have all the answers, but promises not to give up on her. She hears a sound of water, and they find it to be a small waterfall flowing through a hole in the glacier. After the trip, they get back into the city, and Janai goes into a photography shop. Then, with Janai leading the way, they get into a flower shop that has a very bad smell, but she gets inside anyway while he stays at the door. She gets very sad to see all the dry flowers, and he consoles her saying they will find flowers sometime. To get Janai out of the bad mood she immersed herself in after seeing the decaying city, Riley takes her out of the city to go camping. While driving on the road, Riley tells her they are pioneers who don't need the complications of city life, and mentions that man has been happy for thousands of years without all the technology in the world. Riley, who kept staring through the window, questions his idea when he says everything is simple out here. But she doesn't say much after that, and he tells her they are going to enjoy it since they have enough food for the weekend. They reach a cabin located next to a lake, and Janai walks into the forest, leading to the house as Riley follows her carrying their belongings. She notices a fireplace in the house and mentions it to him. He goes out to get some wood after admiring the view of the place. As soon as he stepped out of the house, Riley came face to face with an old man carrying some wood in his hand. The old man gets scared when he sees him and is about to fall down, but Riley quickly approaches to help. The old man speaks in a foreign language at first, making confused, but when Riley asks him if he speaks English, he asks for some water. As Janai fetches him some water, Riley introduces himself to him. The old man tells him his name is Niels. Riley keeps asking different questions, but Niels is about to fall down since he has not eaten for a long time. Riley helps him walk into the house and they give him food from one of their bags. Riley and Janai take a seat in front of the old Niels, full of excitement, and they tell him how they thought they were the only ones left alive. Niels tells them he left the city when everyone disappeared. After coming to terms with the inevitable end of the world, he came back to the cabin to make it his final resting place before those who left this world. Niels tells them the cabin belonged to him, and he was a fisherman in his previous life. Riley asks him what he has been doing all this time, and Niels responds saying he spent it coming to terms with his death. Riley tells him he could wait to join his family because they are willing to offer him everything they have so that he can survive with them. Although Riley keeps being optimistic, Niels coughs heavily and repeatedly. Janai gives him water and tells him that she is glad to find him alive after a long time. Janai shares her thoughts about God abandoning them with Niels, but he doesn't give her a comforting response since he is not hopeful. Although Riley tries to light the room saying it is a good sign they are not alone, Niels repeatedly confirms they are in fact alone. At night, while Riley is asleep, Niels and Janai have a conversation near the fireplace. She tells him they came to Iceland on vacation, and this was her first time overseas. Then she mentions the absence of her family. Niels tells her that she has grief for a home that she couldn't return to, and speaks about his family while painting on a stone. Niels left his wife and his young son during times of his youth to make a living. After spending months on the sea, he returned home only to find his son grown and his wife different from the time he married. He felt alone, although he was in his own home. Jenai thought she left him, but he told her she was already absent. So he spent more time on the sea apart from his family. Jenai thought it was not fair to be separated from one's family, but Niels tells her that she shouldn't hold it against the world if it doesn't behave as she wanted it to. Then, she asks him about how God's plan factors into their meeting, but Niels doesn't believe they factor in his will. As their conversation went on further, she became convinced that God had forsaken them. In the morning, Riley wakes up Jenai. She offers to make tea for him and Niels, but Riley informs about the death of Niels. She quickly gets up and looks at his dead body at the door. Riley tells her about the cemetery near the lake and the spot he picked out for him. After Riley prepares Niels' burial place next to his family, Jenai begins to express her pent-up anger at the old man. She asks him why they should bury him since living or dying didn't matter to him. Riley tells her that this is who they are as human beings. They bury the dead. While Jenai tries to make sense of Niels' short-lived encounter with them, she becomes convinced that there are other survivors who may need their help. Riley reminds her that they have searched for people and now they are the only ones left, but she is determined to prove him wrong. After burying Niels, they get back to the city, and Jenai collects a lot of red plaster at the mall, while Riley puts on gasoline in a can. She marks territories on a map and goes door to door searching for survivors. She uses her red plaster to put a mark on the houses she searched. Riley tries to tell her the truth and asks her to come home, but she keeps arguing. After some back and forth, Riley quits her search and comes home since it didn't make any sense. Days pass while Jenai sits at the computer, and Riley works on his water supply system. Wanting to give her another surprise, Riley takes Jenai to a river that flows between two large rocks. He reminds her of the day she took him to see the glacier, which has small water flowing through it, and tells her that this water was the same one that flows through the glaciers. He tries to explain the science and begs her to have hope. He tearfully asks her to consider his efforts, and she gives him a kiss. They share a moment hugging each other. The couple go back home and share a meal. Jenai tells him about their water problem, but then thanks him for trying to cheer her up. While washing the dishes, Jenai hears a sound of notification from the laptop. She anxiously checked it out, but it was just Riley, who sent a picture of the winter sky to remind her about looking forward to the future. Jenai gets heartbroken after seeing the message and cries as she is reminded of her hopelessness. She sits for a while, staring at the window. After a while, Riley finds a package with his name written on it, but he doesn't open it immediately. Instead, he gets to work on the water problem. Then he opens the package and finds the photos of Jenai he took at different times, printed out on a large paper. He is impressed with the photos, but he knows something is wrong when he looks outside and finds Jenai missing. The photos were from Jenai, which were her parting gift. As he quickly gets into his car and looks all over for her, his water supply wheel is seen to be working. He looks for her at the church, but he later finds her car parked on the green land. Finally, he finds her body floating at the pool where they made love. Riley jumps into the pool and carries her out to the side. He tries to kill himself by drowning himself, but springs out and gets out of the pool. He puts her body on the grass and grieves for her, but he decides not to bury her. He gets into his car and drives off instead. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.